A camera flash blinded her for a moment. Eliza Hayes blinked, regaining her composure as her hand rested naturally on Dominic Vance's arm. He smiled, a wide, practiced grin he had perfected for the covers of business magazines. The ballroom of the Cosmopolitan Club was packed. Men in tuxedos and women in thousands of dollars of silk and diamonds filled the air with a murmur of power and privilege. This was the annual Vance Industries Gala, the pinnacle event celebrating another year of resounding success. A success that she felt was as much hers as the designer dress that hugged her body. Every detail, from the orchids adorning the tables to the guest list, had passed through her approval. She was the perfect hostess, the perfect wife of the CEO of the year. Dominic leaned in, his breath smelling of expensive whiskey. "Get ready, my love," he said. "This will be my best speech yet." She smiled back, a genuine gesture, filled with a pride that swelled her chest. She watched him walk up to the podium under a torrent of applause and felt like she was floating. She tucked a lock of hair behind her ear, aware of the admiring and envious glances around her. It was her world, a universe she had helped build from the ground up. Dominic's voice resonated through the loudspeakers, powerful and confident. He thanked the partners, the investors, the people who had made Vance Industries a construction giant. Eliza took a sip of champagne, savoring every word. She was waiting for the moment when he would say her name, as he always did. The final thank you, the dedication to the woman who was his rock. But the words that followed were not what she expected. Dominic paused dramatically, scanning the room. "Companies, like people, need to evolve," he said. "They need to leave behind what no longer serves them, to embrace a bolder, more dynamic future." A shiver ran down Eliza's spine, a strange dissonance in her husband's tone. "And that is why today," Dominic continued, "we not only celebrate the success of Vance Industries, but its rebirth. I have decided that the company needs a new direction, and so does my life." A thick silence fell over the ballroom. The murmurs ceased. All eyes were fixed on the man at the podium. "I want to introduce you to the person who will not only be the new vice president of operations, but also my partner in this new chapter of my life." A slender young figure rose from one of the front tables. It was Isla Sanchez, Dominic's assistant. She walked toward the stage with a predatory confidence, her red dress cutting through the air like an open wound. Dominic took her hand. "And very soon," he announced, his voice loud, "she will be the new Mrs. Vance." The air left Eliza's lungs. The world tilted on its axis. Isla's smiling face on the giant screen behind the podium. Dominic's hand possessively on her waist. She heard her own name mentioned at last. "I want to thank Eliza for the years she dedicated to me. But sometimes, for a man to fly, he must let go of the dead weight that anchors him to the ground." The humiliation was a wave of fire that burned her face. The whispers were now a roar in her ears. Faces that had once smiled at her now looked at her with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. She stood up. Her legs trembled violently. She walked with her back straight, an automaton programmed not to fall apart in public. She left the ballroom and walked into a service hallway, the echo of applause for the new couple chasing her like a pack of dogs. The door opened behind her. It was Dominic. His face no longer wore the CEO's mask. It was a sneer of cold resolve. Eliza slapped him. The dry sound echoed in the empty hallway. "How could you?" Her voice was a broken hiss. Dominic didn't even flinch. He calmly touched his cheek. "You deserved it, Eliza. You became comfortable, predictable. You no longer served me. Isla is ambitious. She's hungry. You lost your appetite years ago. My money, my things, everything is in my name," she said, trying to find something to cling to. He let out a short, cruel laugh. How naive you are. Do you think I didn't prepare for this? Try to use your cards. Try to get into your bank account. Everything has been transferred for months. Legally, you have nothing. The house on the Upper East Side, too. My lawyers will contact yours, if you can afford one. Terror, pure and icy, replaced her fury. This can't be happening. It's already happening. Now, if you'll excuse me, my fiancé is waiting for me. Oh, and a piece of advice. Don't go back to the house. The locks have already been changed. Security has orders not to let you in. He turned and left, leaving her alone in the hallway with the smell of disinfectant and the hum of industrial freezers. She stood there for a time she couldn't measure. The $1,000 dress suddenly felt like a cheap costume. She went out a back door. The cold night air of New York City hit her. The valet, oblivious to everything, brought her SUV. She gave him the last bill she had in her small purse as a tip. She drove, aimlessly, with no destination. The lights of Broadway, the illuminated Empire State Building. Everything seemed part of a movie she wasn't in. Every red light was a reminder that she had nowhere to go. The tears finally came, hot and silent, tracing paths down her perfect makeup. Her phone rang several times. They were surely the socialites looking for more gossip. She threw it on the passenger seat. She kept driving until the glass buildings of the financial district gave way to the tree-lined streets and lower, older buildings of the West Village. She stopped in front of a 3-story apartment building, much more modest than anything she had visited in the last decade. She turned off the engine and sat in silence, looking at the second-floor balcony, filled with potted plants. She only had one place to go. She climbed the stairs, each step a monumental effort. She rang the doorbell, the jarring sound in the stillness of the night. The door opened, and her friend Chloe's face appeared, first confused, and then flooded with immediate understanding upon seeing her friend's state. Chloe said nothing. She simply opened her arms. And there, on the doorstep of her only true friend's modest apartment, Eliza Hayes's world finally collapsed completely. She clung to her. The crying was now a heart-wrenching sob that shook her entire body, the sound of a life breaking into 1,000,000 pieces on a concrete floor. She was stripped of everything, save for the gala gown that was now the shroud of the woman she used to be. From dead weight to the best candidate, the smell of burnt coffee and the sound of traffic on Broadway had become her alarm clock. Eliza opened her eyes, and for a second didn't recognize the low ceiling with a slight water stain in the corner. Then she remembered. She wasn't in her king-size bed on the Upper East Side, but on a sofa bed that took up half of Chloe's small West Village apartment. 3 weeks had passed, 3 weeks that felt like a lifetime. She got up, her body sore from the makeshift mattress, and walked barefoot on the cold tile floor, so different from the polished marble she used to take for granted. In the kitchen, Chloe was already ready to leave for her job at an art gallery. She left a plate of sliced papaya and a thermos of coffee. "See you tonight, Eliza. Don't despair. You can do this." Her friend's words were a mixture of affection and a growing impatience. Eliza barely nodded. She sat at the small dining table and turned on Chloe's old laptop. She opened the bank's portal, a masochistic routine she repeated every morning. The balance was still the same. 0. An absolute 0. The joint accounts were empty, her personal cards canceled. Dominic had erased her from the financial system with surgical efficiency. The money was running out. The little cash Chloe had lent her, and what she got for the watch she was wearing the night of the gala, was almost gone. Eliza opened the velvet box she had managed to take from the house in a moment of carelessness by the guards the day she went to get her personal documents. Inside, a pair of diamond earrings, an anniversary gift, and a pearl necklace her grandmother had bequeathed to her. They were the last vestiges of her former life. With a heavy heart, she put them in her purse. The pawn shop downtown was a chaos of people with despair painted on their faces. She stood in a long line under the sun, feeling exposed and vulnerable in her borrowed clothes, a simple blouse and jeans that were a little too big. When her turn came, a man with a jeweler's loupe examined her pieces with disinterest. He offered her a ridiculous fraction of their real value. "It's all you'll get, ma'am. Take it or leave it." She took it. The wad of bills in her hand felt dirty, heavy. It was the price of her memories. Back at the apartment, the loneliness was a physical entity. To torment herself, she opened a social media site. And there they were, Dominic and Isla on a yacht off the coast of the Hamptons. He was hugging her from behind, both of them laughing. The caption read, "Renewed." Another picture showed Isla's hand, sporting an absurdly large engagement ring, holding a champagne glass. "Building our future," it read. Eliza felt a sour nausea. She slammed the laptop shut. Their future was cemented on the ruins of hers. She saw other posts by Isla, now installed as the new queen. Shopping on Fifth Avenue, dinners at exclusive restaurants, a new sports car, all with the Vance Industries corporate card. The audacity was absolute. With the money from the jewelry, she paid off her debts to Chloe and bought some more suitable clothes for job hunting. She printed her resume at a cafe. Reading it, she felt ashamed. President of the Cosmopolitan Club Charity Committee. Event organizer for Vance Industries. Wife. There were no quantifiable skills, no software experience, no corporate jargon. It was the resume of a high-end companion. The interviews were a succession of humiliations. At a marketing agency, a 25-year-old woman looked at her with condescension. "Here we use Trello, Slack, Asana. Do you know what those are?" Eliza shook her head. At a real estate company, the human resources manager recognized her. "You're Dominic Vance's ex-wife, aren't you? What a painful situation." They didn't call her back. Every slammed door, every look of pity, every no thanks was a small nail in the coffin of her self-esteem. She started to feel that Dominic was right. She was dead weight. A useless, pampered woman. The worst interview was at a small tech company in the Flatiron district. The interviewer, a guy with a Silicon Valley genius vibe, didn't even look her in the eye as he read her resume. He smirked. "So, Eliza, explain to me what event organizer means exactly." She tried to articulate how her social skills had closed deals, how her contact list was an invaluable asset. He cut her off. "So, you threw good parties. Cool. Look, here we need people who know how to program, who understand metrics, not who know how to pair canapes with wine. To be frank, you are not qualified to even serve coffee." She left that office feeling like she couldn't breathe. She walked aimlessly in the rain that had started to fall, her makeup running down her cheeks, along with tears of frustration. When she got to the apartment, she found Chloe. "I'm done," she told her friend, her voice broken. "I can't do it. They were right. I'm useless. I'm going to look for a job as a waitress or cleaning houses. That's all I must be good for." Chloe grabbed her by the shoulders. Her gaze was hard, without a hint of pity. "Enough, Eliza. Stop crying, and listen to me carefully. The woman who organized parties and lived on the Upper East Side is dead. Dominic killed her that night. Understand that. As long as you keep thinking like her, feeling sorry for her, you're going to keep failing. You have to start thinking like the woman who is right here, in the West Village, the one who just sold her jewelry to survive. That woman is not a victim. She's a survivor. Stop crying over what you lost and start fighting for what you're going to build." Chloe's words were like a slap of ice water. Eliza fell silent, processing her friend's brutal honesty. That night, she couldn't sleep. The interviewer's phrases and Chloe's words spun in her head. She got up and went back to the laptop. She opened the job portals, but this time with a different perspective. She was no longer looking for something easy or familiar. She was looking for a challenge. And then, she saw it. A discreet ad. Thorn Holdings, seeking executive assistant to the CEO. The name sent a chill down her spine. Marcus Thorn was Dominic's direct competitor, his nemesis in the real estate world. They were legendary rivals. Applying there was crazy. It was a declaration of war. A spark ignited inside her. An emotion she hadn't felt in a long time. A mixture of fear and icy fury. She opened the form. In the cover letter section, she didn't try to sugarcoat the truth. She wrote with brutal honesty. My name is Eliza Hayes. My experience is not on a traditional resume. It is in having helped build an empire that was taken from me. I know the industry from the inside. I understand the players, and I know what it takes to be on top. I am not asking for an opportunity out of pity. I demand it for my potential. Give me 30 minutes of your time, and I will show you why I'm the best candidate you will find. She attached her pathetic resume and hit send. She felt ridiculous, but strangely liberated. She didn't expect anything. It was a cry into the void. 3 days passed. 3 days in which she tried unsuccessfully to get a job. Anything. She was about to accept a receptionist position at a gym when her cell phone vibrated. An unknown number. She answered with reluctance. Good afternoon. I'm calling from the Human Resources Department at Thorn Holdings. We received your application. We would like to schedule an interview with you for the position of executive assistant. The voice on the other end of the line was professional and distant. Eliza was speechless for a moment, her heart pounding with an immense force. Yes, she finally said, her own voice sounding far away. Yes, of course. I'll be there. The beginning of a new empire. The Thorn Holdings building rose in the heart of the financial district like a blade of glass and steel pointing to the sky. It was a monument to power, designed to intimidate. Eliza felt small as she walked through the automatic doors and onto the black marble lobby. Every polished surface reflected a woman she barely recognized, dressed in a second-hand suit that Chloe had helped her alter. A receptionist silently guided her through hallways that looked like modern art galleries to a mahogany door at the end of a long corridor. The top floor. The office was immense, with a window that offered a panoramic view of the entire city. Sitting behind a desk that looked the size of a car was Marcus Thorn. He didn't look up from the documents he was reading. Have a seat, he said, without a preamble. His voice was low, sharp. Eliza sat in the chair across from him, feeling like the air was too thick to breathe. 2 minutes of absolute silence passed, an intimidation tactic Eliza recognized immediately. Dominic used it all the time. Finally, Marcus Thorn closed the folder and fixed his eyes on her. They were dark, intense, and seemed to see through the facade of security she was trying to project. Eliza Hayes, he said, as if testing the name in his mouth. Alejandro Vance's wife, or rather, his ex-wife. The news of your public humiliation was the gossip of the year in our circles. Tell me, he said, why would I want to hire the shadow of the man who is my biggest competitor? The question was direct, brutal. A part of her wanted to shrink, but Chloe's voice resonated in her mind. You're not a victim. You're a survivor. She straightened her back. Because that shadow knows every one of her competitor's weaknesses. Because that shadow helped build the strategy that led him to the top. Because that shadow is hungrier and has more to prove than any other candidate you're going to interview today. Marcus didn't blink. And what makes you think you have what it takes to work here? My pace is relentless. My standards are absolute. I don't have time to teach. I don't have patience for mistakes, and I'm not interested in your personal drama. I don't expect your patience, Mr. Thorne. Just an opportunity. I know my resume is a joke. I know I don't have formal corporate experience. But I learn fast, and I work harder than anyone. You're not taking a risk on someone who comes from a comfort zone. You're taking a risk on someone who has lost everything and is willing to do whatever it takes to get it back. Not to get the money back, but my self-respect. There was another long silence. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her. His gaze was unreadable. I saw your cover letter. A risky move. I almost threw it in the trash. My human resources team thinks I'm crazy for calling you. They think you're a risk, that you could be a spy, or worse, an emotional liability. And what do you think? Eliza asked, holding his gaze. I think desperation can be the most powerful motivator there is. The job is yours, Ms. Hayes. You start Monday at 7 in the morning. My current assistant will send you the details. Don't make me regret it. Eliza left that office with her legs trembling, but this time it was from adrenaline, not fear. She had achieved the impossible. From assistant to director, the first few months were hell. Marcus Thorne hadn't lied. He was a relentless boss. He communicated in short sentences and expected her to understand everything instantly. He asked her for financial reports that she had to look up on YouTube tutorials at night to understand. He put her on conference calls with architects and engineers who spoke a technical language that left her dizzy. She made mistakes. She confused a date. She sent an email to the wrong person. She scheduled a meeting for the wrong time. Every mistake was pointed out by Marcus with a coldness that made her want to disappear. There was no yelling, just a disappointing and sharp correction. Perfection was expected. She would get to Chloe's apartment after midnight, with her head about to explode, and wake up at 4:30 in the morning to review her notes before leaving. She ate at her desk. She read about urban development on the subway. She sacrificed her weekends to learn how to use the software that everyone else handled with ease. She constantly felt stupid, slow, an imposter who was about to be found out. But she didn't quit. The image of Dominic's face and Isla's smile was a fuel that kept her going. The cold validation in Chloe's eyes every night was her reward. Slowly, something began to change. She began to anticipate Marcus's needs. She learned to decipher his communication style and discovered that her old skills had a new application. The same social intelligence she used to charm an investor at a gala dinner, she now used to calm a furious client over the phone. The same memory for details that allowed her to remember dozens of people's favorite wine now helped her find inconsistencies in long, tedious contracts. She began to organize Marcus's chaotic schedule with an efficiency that surprised other executives. She wasn't just surviving. She was starting to be good at her job. The turning point came on a Thursday night. She was reviewing the documents for the bidding on a mega project in Manhattan, the Centenary Project. It was the contract of the year, and the final competition was, of course, against Vance Industries. Eliza reviewed the zoning plans and material costs for the third time. Something wasn't right. There was a small clause in a newly approved city ordinance that no one on the legal team seemed to have noticed. It limited the height of construction in a key section of the land, which invalidated a large part of the proposed architectural design and would shoot up the costs if they had to redesign. She felt a knot of panic and excitement. Vance Industries, with its new impulsive and careless leadership, had surely missed it too. This error could cost millions. It was her chance to prove her worth once and for all. With her heart in her throat, she took the folder and walked to Marcus's office. He was still there, focused on his computer. "Mr. Thorne, excuse me for the interruption." He looked up with an expression of impatience. "What is it, Hayes? I'm busy." "It's about the Centenary Project. I think I found a problem. A big one." She explained the situation. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but gained confidence as she laid out the facts. She showed him the ordinance, the plans, the cost calculations. Marcus listened with skepticism, his face an impenetrable mask. When she finished, he took the papers and reviewed them in silence. The entire legal team reviewed this. And finance, he said, his tone full of doubt. I know, and I think they all overlooked it. The ordinance is new. It's only a month old. It's easy for it to get lost in the shuffle. Marcus looked at her intently for a long moment. Then he picked up the phone. He called the head of his legal team. She heard him speak, asking short, precise questions. She watched him put it on speaker. The lawyer's voice sounded nervous, evasive. Marcus asked him to verify the specific ordinance Eliza had pointed out. There was a silence on the line, followed by a throat clearing and a confession of guilt. The error was real. Marcus slowly hung up the phone. He stared at the papers on his desk. Then he looked up and looked at her. For the first time since he had met her, the mask of coldness vanished. In his eyes, there was no impatience or skepticism. There was something new, respect, and an unmistakable glint of admiration. "Good job, Hayes," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Good job. You saved the company from a multi-million-dollar mistake." In that moment, Eliza knew she had done it. She was no longer anyone's shadow. She was standing in her own light. A new chapter 6 months later, Eliza was no longer Hayes, the assistant. She was Eliza, the manager of new projects at Thorne Holdings. She had her own office, smaller than Marcus's, but with a glass wall that allowed her to see the city skyline that now felt like hers. The constant fear had been replaced by an undercurrent of adrenaline and confidence. She no longer studied tutorials at night. Now she led meetings, and her opinions were heard and valued. She had moved from Chloe's couch to a small, bright apartment in the West Village, a space that was only hers, paid for with her own hard work. The dynamic with Marcus had also changed. The boss-to-employee relationship had dissolved, giving way to a collaboration between equals, an intellectual partnership that often felt like something more. Their working lunches at nearby restaurants stretched longer than necessary. They would start by discussing steel prices and end up talking about books, music, and places they'd like to travel. He discovered the dry humor she hid, and she discovered that behind the ruthless CEO was a man with a brilliant mind and an unexpected warmth. The chemistry between them was an unspoken agreement, a palpable tension in late meetings, when only the two of them were left in the office, the silence broken only by the tapping of their computers. As Eliza rose, Dominic's empire cracked. The loss of the Centenary project was a devastating blow to Vance Industries' reputation and finances. The news spread like wildfire in the sector. Dominic, humiliated, became erratic and paranoid. In a board meeting, he exploded in front of everyone, throwing reports on the table and blaming Isla and her team directly for the negligence. Isla, far from being cowed, responded with icy venom, accusing him of being a dinosaur, incapable of innovating. The rift between them became a chasm. Ila's spending continued unchecked. A new car, weekend trips to Miami, the remodeling of the vice presidential office. She was acting not as a partner, but as a plunderer, extracting as much value as possible before the ship sank. Eliza, through the contacts she still maintained in the industry, heard the rumors. Vance Industries was not paying its suppliers. Projects were being delayed. The best talent was beginning to look for other opportunities. On an idle afternoon, Eliza saw a photo on an acquaintance's profile. It was from a party on a yacht in the Hamptons. In the background, Out of focus but unmistakable was Isla, laughing in the arms of a young investor known for his playboy reputation. She was securing her exit plan. One Friday afternoon, after a particularly grueling week, Marcus walked Eliza to the elevator. The gesture was unusual. He normally said goodbye from his desk with a simple, "See you Monday." He stopped before the doors opened, breaking for the first time their unwritten protocol of professionalism. "Eliza," he said, his voice a little lower than normal. "I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me. Tomorrow, without talking about blueprints or contracts." Eliza's heart skipped a beat. Panic, an echo of her past life, washed over her for an instant. A powerful man inviting her out. The image of the gala. The public humiliation. She saw the doubt in her own eyes reflected in the polished steel of the doors, but then she looked at Marcus. He wasn't Dominic. His gaze wasn't possessive, but expectant and respectful. There was patience in his posture. She saw the man who had given her a chance when no one else did, the one who had pushed her to be better, the one who looked at her as if he saw her true worth. "Yes," she replied, a smile slowly forming on her lips. "I'd love to, Marcus." The restaurant in Midtown was elegant and discreet, a place where you could talk without being overheard. The conversation flowed effortlessly. They were no longer boss and assistant. They were just a man and a woman. Eliza, for the first time, told him about the night of the gala, not with self-pity, but as the origin story of the woman she had become. She told him about the humiliation, but also about the strange liberation she felt in losing everything. Marcus listened with an attention that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. Then, he opened up as well. He told her about how he lost his parents in an accident when he was 20, inheriting a company on the verge of bankruptcy. He confessed that he had buried himself in work as a way of not drowning in grief, building walls around himself so he would never feel that vulnerability again. "That's why I'm so demanding," he concluded. "It's the only thing I've ever known how to do. Protect what I built." In that confession, Eliza understood everything. She saw the wounded young man behind the ruthless man. They realized they were both survivors, scarred by their pasts, but determined to build their own futures. The attraction that had been bubbling under the surface for months finally came to light, strong and undeniable. As they left the restaurant, the cool night air enveloped them. They walked for a bit down the tree-lined streets, the lights from the boutiques creating an intimate atmosphere. They stopped under the light of a street lamp. Marcus turned to her, his expression serious and tender at the same time. "Eliza!" He said her name in a whisper. She looked up at him. He cupped her face with one hand, his thumb gently stroking her cheek, and then he kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of passionate abandon, but one of deep meaning. It was a kiss of recognition, of respect, of relief. It was the silent promise that second chances existed and that true love could be born from the ashes. Eliza kissed him back, feeling the last ghosts of her past vanish in the stillness of that night in Midtown. For the first time in years, she felt whole, happy, and full of hope. The final triumphant speech. The image cut sharply. The silence in Vance Industries' main office was heavy, suffocating. The only light came from a desk lamp that illuminated a mess of papers and an almost empty bottle of whiskey. Dominic Vance was sitting in the darkness, his gaze lost in nothingness. The smell of alcohol and defeat permeated the air. In his trembling hand, he held a letter. The logo of a major bank was printed at the top. The words were cold, legal, devastating. Final notice of mortgage foreclosure. He had lost everything. The building, the company, his father's legacy. With a clumsy motion, he grabbed his cell phone, found Isla's name in his contacts, and pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before her recorded, cheerful voice filled the line. "Hi, I can't come to the phone right now. Please leave a message." Dominic left no message. With a roar of fury and despair, he threw the phone with all his might against the marble wall. The device shattered, its fragments scattering across the floor like the remnants of his shattered life. He collapsed onto the desk, his body shaking with dry, silent sobs, a dethroned king in a kingdom of ruins. Time folded in on itself, healing wounds and cultivating new joys. A year after that first kiss, the sun in upstate New York bathed a small stone chapel. Eliza, in a simple and elegant dress, walked toward Marcus. There weren't hundreds of guests, just a handful of loved ones. Chloe was in the front row, her eyes filled with happy tears. There was no social contract in their vows, but a promise of partnership, of building together, of being each other's safe harbor. It was a whispered oath with the honesty of 2 souls who had found each other in the storm. 6 months later, on the Sunday morning in their home, a house filled with light, books, the aroma of fresh coffee, Eliza watched Marcus read in the garden. She walked out and sat beside him, handing him a small gift box. He opened it with curiosity. Inside was a pair of tiny baby shoes. Marcus looked up from the shoes to her, his eyes searching for confirmation. Eliza simply nodded, a tear of pure happiness rolling down her cheek. The joy that erupted on Marcus's face was brighter than any business success, a pure, immense, and genuine joy. He hugged his wife, lifting her off the ground in a celebratory spin. The whole world contained in that perfect moment. A year after that hug, the cry of a baby mixed with laughter in the house. Mia had arrived, a girl with dark eyes like her father's, and a smile that was all her mother's. Eliza had become the director of strategic development at Thorn Holdings. She learned to balance board meetings with lullabies, to close multi-million-dollar deals over the phone while rocking her daughter with her foot. Her home was not a cold mansion on the Upper East Side, but a refuge of love with toys scattered across the living room and family portraits on the walls. It was a real, imperfect, and absolutely wonderful life. The New York Public Library was glowing, its marble and bronze shining under the chandeliers. Thorn Holdings was celebrating its 25th anniversary. The business, political, and cultural elite of New York were present. But this time, Eliza was not a spectator. She was at the center of it all, on the stage, next to Marcus. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, Mia was sleeping. When Marcus finished his speech, he passed the microphone to her. Eliza looked out into the crowd, at the hundreds of faces watching her. She felt no panic, only a deep calm. Her voice, clear and firm, filled the great hall. She spoke of resilience, of the human capacity to rebuild oneself. She spoke of how true success is not measured in buildings or numbers, but in the foundations on which we build our lives. Foundations of respect, honesty, and, above all, love. She ended her speech by looking at Marcus, and then at the little girl in her arms. Because a second chance, she said, is not just for starting over, it's for doing it right, for building something that time can't tear down. The applause was deafening, a wave of genuine admiration. In the middle of the crowd, a man in an ill-fitting waiter's uniform stood frozen. A tray with champagne glasses trembled in his hand. Dominic Vance, thinner, his face haggard and his eyes empty like a man who has been defeated by life, watched the stage as if he were seeing a ghost. That was Eliza, the woman he had called dead weight, now shining with a light of her own, powerful and serene. He saw the way Marcus looked at her, with a devotion and a pride he never knew how to offer. And then his eyes fixed on the bundle she held with such tenderness. A baby, a daughter. The reality hit him with the force of an invisible fist, leaving him breathless. The family that could have been his, the love he had spurned, the genuine success he had traded for superficiality. Everything he had lost materialized in that image on the stage. He was the architect of his own miserable ruin. In that instant, across the distance and the sea of people, her eyes met his. It was only for a second. Dominic expected to see triumph in her gaze, hatred, contempt, but he found none of that. In Eliza's eyes, there was only a serene, almost distant compassion, as if she were looking at a stranger for whom she felt a faint pity. Then, she blinked, and the connection broke. She smiled, but not for him. She smiled at the little girl in her arms and turned to hug her husband. For Eliza, he was now just an anecdote, a blurry shadow of a past she had overcome. For Dominic, she was the mirror that reflected the magnitude of his absolute failure. He let the tray drop. The glasses shattered on the floor, but the sound was lost in the roar of the applause. Later, away from the bustle of the party, Eliza and Marcus were on a terrace overlooking Central Park. The night air was cool. Marcus hugged her from behind while she gently rocked Mia, who was now looking at the city lights with curiosity. The murmur of the celebration seemed to belong to another world. "You built all of this," Marcus said into her ear, his voice filled with deep admiration. "Your empire, our family." Eliza leaned back against his chest, feeling his heart beating. She looked at her daughter's sleeping face, and then turned to look at her husband with eyes shining with tears of a happiness that overwhelmed her soul. "We built it," she corrected gently. "True love always wins, Marcus. Always." The camera slowly zoomed out, leaving the family united in an embrace, a silhouette of hope and strength against the infinite tapestry of New York City lights. They were living proof that even after the darkest night, the sun always shines again, often with more strength and warmth than ever before.